Now, isn't this interesting? Can you all hear me well? I'm pretty sure you can. So as it was introduced, here's a young man that started up in an R&D center at Castleton between Newport and Cardiff. It was a BT radio research lab, and I absolutely loved engineering. It was kind of in the blood. In fact, from when I was little, I'd fix things for people. Electric vacuum cleaners, radios. I mean, God knows what it was. I was just an enthusiastic engineer, kind of in the blood. And I learned some incredibly important things in life that last to this day. The importance of goodwill. Here was a lady that lived just down the street from me, and she had this incredible music box that her husband had bought her in the Second World War, coming back from Europe, and it was broken. So she knew that in that area, I was Mr. Fixit. In our little town, I was Mr. Fixit. So could I look at it? I said, well, of course. So I looked at it, and sure enough, the spring was broken. I riveted it, took it all apart, oiled it, put it back together. What a complicated piece of mechanical engineering. I mean, you imagine this thing, which has a drum, and it played 10 tunes as it clicked and moved. This little comb moved around with this little clicking arrangement. Very, absolutely fabulous. But it was broken. So I fixed it. Now, this was typical of Terry Matthews in this little town. And I took it back, and I said, Mrs. Williams, I fixed that. And she said, how much do I owe you? And I said, well, you don't owe me anything. I enjoyed fixing it. Well, I ought to pay you something. I said, no, I enjoyed it. Now, here is an interesting thing, a very important thing in life to learn. You see, if she'd paid me, people typically work, they get paid, it's netted out. You worked, you got paid. And I didn't get paid. But the goodwill, I mean, she was almost in tears that I'd fixed this thing for her. But she never forgot a birthday, never forgot a Christmas, because she remembered. I'm convinced that if in that relationship over time, I was to add up what came back to me for actually doing this for nothing, and I enjoyed doing it anyway, I'm sure that the return to me would have been much, much bigger. That's called goodwill. Now, you can learn from that, I think, because it's fundamental. It's in relationships. Relationships matter. How do you create relationships? How do you create teams? And so I've learned in my life how to create teams and put them under pressure. For instance, in the world of high tech that I'm in, it's almost like you have a football game and there's two teams, but you don't know where the goalposts are. Now, those that are on the team that doesn't communicate well, they don't know where the goalposts are, neither did the other side. But the one that communicates best, when somebody scored some sort of a goal or they got visibility of the goalposts, that's their advantage. Boom, 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 it goes in the goalpost, they win. High tech is a bit like that. Sometimes it's like having a team, you're playing a football game, but you don't actually know yet where the goalposts are. It's the team that found where the goalposts were first that'll win that game. So how do you do that? You have a very good, tight team. I explain to my children, one of the most important things in life is to have around you people you trust. If you have to look over their shoulder at everything they do, that's not a very good relationship. You may as well not have the relationship if you have to double check everything they do. What you want in life is people around you that you totally trust. That what they're doing is actually good for you. You're part of that team. The team works together to win. I think that's probably one of the most important things I learned. So I take you back in time. And I've always been able to think forward. Not think in a manner where it's too narrow. I invite you to think big and keep that in your mind and begin filling it out. From the get-go, you begin filling it out. And be knowledgeable about the area that you're in. So let's go back in time. I left the UK on a holiday. I was actually originally going to go to San Diego. Think about this, San Diego. Average temperature all year round, 75 degrees. What a lovely place. I never actually got there, although I've been there many times. It is indeed a beautiful place. While I was there on holiday, somebody called me up, a person from Llanelli, was a friend from many years before. And he said, Terry, come on up to this semiconductor company that I'm working with in Ottawa. And this was in July. Here I am on holiday. Well, I'd never been to Ottawa. So I drove to Ottawa, had an interview. Oh, you know a lot about radio, you know a lot about telecom, because, of course, I was part of this research establishment at BT, the BT research establishment at Castleton, long gone, by the way. So they offered me a job. Now, this was 3 times the salary that I got at BT. If it was 10% more, I'd have probably said, you know, it's a nice offer. Maybe 20% more, it would have been a nice offer. I'd have probably said, you know, it's a nice offer, but frankly, I'm doing pretty well where I am. But a tripling is kind of on the high side. So I took the job. And I started up in this semiconductor company with somebody from Llanelli. And I did very well. And I traveled all over the world selling semiconductors, including coming to London, Paris, Singapore, Hong Kong, like bump, 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 bump. And in particular all over the United States, selling integrated circuits. Actually, not so much selling, although I will say it's selling. I'm an application engineer in this company, applying these integrated circuits to various solutions. I met lots and lots of people, and I developed an ability which I'd like you to remember. Of the 10 things in your in-tray to do, focus on the one. Be able to focus. Take the ones that are meaningful business. So I was very famous in the company for taking, out of every 10 things coming in my inbox, I'd say no to 9 of them. I'd actually make the decision. Relatively low in the company, but I made the decision, and the marketing and sales guys loved it. It means that they didn't waste time trying to get business when somebody said, we're not doing that. They actually enjoyed it. They'd spent time trying to gain business, and here's this guy in headquarters saying, we're not doing that. They actually enjoyed that. It stopped them working on something that's unlikely, and they put energy in something that is likely. So guess what? The 10% I kept all became very valuable business. So focus is an incredibly important thing in life. In fact, the 2 things I would say that are important to me after creating a strong team with a good vision, it's focus and persistence. Then you can win. Persistence, you never give up. Never, ever give up. You fight and fight and fight. And if you lose one time round, you go back in and fight again. Just never give up. Now, I've done this kind of thing over 80 times. Actually, about 4 new companies a year I've created. So let's go back in time again. I'm working in this company. It's called Microsystems, and traveling all over the world, gaining lots of knowledge about the area of engineering with integrated circuits. But the most senior management people, they didn't seem to be down at street level fighting. They were almost imperial. And that was sad because in the early 70s, I'm talking 1970 to 1975, the early industry of integrated circuits, Texas Instruments would kick you in the teeth to pick up $1 on the streets of New York. It was extremely competitive. Extremely competitive. And these people were just very imperial, and in my mind I say, that attitude, the team isn't fighting. So I laughed, and I started up a little company. Now, can you believe it? This was with £2,000. Like, well, it's not a lot of money. How can you live on £2,000? It's not actually about money so much as it is about teamwork and having the team fighting. And this little lesson has probably never been more important than it is today. You know, when I was young and I left college, I'd go out and you're bound to get some kind of an apprenticeship. It's almost like guaranteed. You'd have to be a total idiot not to get a job. And in Wales, this was a time when it was coal, iron, steel, copper, still going. And the value added, making bridges, making castings, engineering all around you. Not today. Not today. So maybe some of the lessons I learned will be very good for you. So, with the house that I bought, the value had gone up. I used the value that I developed in that house to borrow $4,000, about £2,000. Certainly not enough to live on. But I managed to live for 6 months on this incredibly small amount of money. And I think the important thing was the image that I created. So here was a friend, a young girl, who answered the phones. So you might say, well, like, what's phones got to do with this story? Well, you see, if you call a company because you're interested in something that they claim to make, just put yourself in this position. Here's what you really don't want to cast as an image. Ring, ring. Hello? Can I help you? Yes. It's not a very good answer. Or worse still, Mike and I are out right now having lunch. If you leave a message, we'll get back to you. That's not a very good image to create. So what image did I create only on $4,000? Think about it. You're looking to try and generate business. We decided on going after a particular type of business. In 6 months, working around the clock, 7 days a week. Sometimes I'd wake up in the morning just to sleep at the desk. Focused in a particular area that we believed in, and that customers, some customers said they wanted this thing called a tone receiver. This goes back in time. You pick up a phone, and in those days you'd rotary dial. And everybody wanted push-button phones. Pop, 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 pop. Pushing the buttons. But it's the receiver at the far end of the line. It was very expensive. So we developed, in 6 months, working around the clock, a friend and I, a guy called Mike Copeland, literally around the clock, we developed this very sharp little tone receiver at 1/10 of the sell price. And I developed relations with clients that liked what they were told. Now the image. What about the image? So the phone would ring. Ring, ring. Good morning, Mitel Corporation. Can I help you? Yes, I'd like to speak to Terry Matthews. Oh, that'll be extension 7934. 7934. Well, okay. Now tell me what image that conveyed. What image did that? It just said, well, it must be a pretty big organization. There's only 2 people in it, plus the young girl answering the phone who was a friend. I even at one time, and I thought this was going a touch overboard, because I do like to be reasonably honest. Reasonably honest. I don't want to outright lie. But at one time I thought it ought to be, oh, that'll be extension 2179 in building B. You see? But that would have been too much of a lie. But stretching a touch, you know, the image matters. What did the literature say? What did the address look like? Make it so that it appeals to the type of client you're selling to. Now, the fact there was only 3 people in there, and one of them was only sort of part-time help, but after 6 months, we really did start to generate business. And the business grew very fast. And this was the time when microprocessors were coming out. And this thing grew at a ferocious rate. You imagine, here is something that's in demand, normally $1,500 each. We sold for $150. I even felt a touch guilty about it because there was 80% profit, even at $150. But the company just shot up. And the other thing that was funny is that I started up in the UK at the same time. Somebody that I got to know in the previous company, Microsystems, a guy called George Smith, decided he liked what we were doing. He worked for nothing for 6 months. He became the UK guy. And by the way, Mitel became a very large-sized company in Wales, very early on. I did a similar thing in the United States. Now remember, this is really risky, you know. It's important in life to be able to take risks. But think about it. Don't be risk averse. Have a goal. And if you fail the first time, you go back in again. Become an entrepreneur and have some fun doing it. It's about team. It's about respect for the team members. It's about hard work ethic. It's about stretching the goals. So Mitel grew very fast. First year, $250,000. But remember, my salary was only $10,000. But the first year did $250,000. Second year, $1.4 million. No joke. Now it's really motoring. Roughly split equally between Canada, US, UK. I started up at the same time. You imagine, $4,000, much less than I was earning, starting up in 3 countries at the same time. Are you out of your tree? But you see, they didn't earn anything. There's nothing to pay. No money to pay. Team. Team under pressure. Team under pressure with focus. 7 days a week. Man, did it ever perform. The company more than doubled every year. 1.4, 5.4. 11.2, 21.3, 44 million, 111 million, 204 million. It actually grew to be $1.5 billion. And in 1999-2000, I split it into 3 companies: semiconductor, manufacturing, and systems. That's what I did with that one. But then in 1981, this was a time when the monopolies of BT and the monopolies of ATT in the US were being pushed by government to break up. This was my first spin-out, a company called Datacom. This time I was much more wealthy. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Mitel went public in 1978. I could have retired. I could have gone down to Florida, had a nice home in Florida, twiddled my toes in the sand, lie in the sun, have a nice glass of margarita. Are you kidding? About after a day, I think that would kill me just lying in the sun. I mean, what the hell are you going to do in life? Much more fun to work with a team, drive business, and go global. Absolutely go global. I've done that now well over 80 times. 92, Simon, now, I think. 93 companies now, running at about 4 a year. There are 5 companies started up recently in Wales. There's a total of 22 startups underway right now, all less than 5 years old. So on average, about 4 new companies a year, typically with young people from college and university, people that have the right drive, people that have the right education, and the motivation to say, I'm going to have a go at it and take risks. And that's what we do. And it doesn't have to be big money. It doesn't have to come from some venture capitalist that says, I've got £1 billion and I hand it out to deal flow. I don't do that. I start companies up from scratch. I think of the names. I deal with client requirements. Now that's important because when you deal with client requirements, it's not so speculative. You imagine if somebody says, well, I have an idea, and that's actually very dangerous. If you just say, well, I have an idea for something, and I'm really going to work hard at it, and you might get what's called angel investors, friends and so on, to put money in that. So you work very hard at it, and you I don't know, derived some sort of a product or a solution after 12 months, or even if you work very hard after 6 months, then you find it doesn't sell very well. Then there's a tendency to want to prove you're right. You work even harder to try and prove you're right. The truth is, it was wrong from the get-go. Much better to spend time right up front and work with potential clients to find out what would they like to have. Because you see, if it's a client requirement, then it becomes driven by client requirements. Then all of the work and money you spend is actually driven by what the client told you. And then when you've got it, guess what? They'll buy it. Much, much lower in terms of speculative spending, speculative money spent, speculative energy spent. Don't waste your time. It means it's focused around what the client said they want. So that's what I do. I focus on what clients say they want. I take young people and expect them to work 7 days a week. That's right. Because you get one shot at that. It's a bit like the Olympics. Lots of other people can run, can swim, can jump. But you want to go to the Olympics? You want to create something big? You'd better be totally all in. And typically after 1 to 2 years, bang, you can make a hit. Now, I've done that many, many, many times. I enjoy it no end. I travel more than most to China and India and France and Germany and Australia and Singapore. And it's incredible fun to work with a team, drive it hard and win. That's what I do. I just wanted you to know. And in this little discussion, my advice to you is have a go. And you will never regret it. Thank you very much.